Chapter 3 of Poppy Playtime got a ton of news in the past week, from developer updates, teasers, more ARG hints, some theories suggesting Chapter 3 could be getting a trailer here in a few days, and much more we're going to be breaking down deeply today. Like the video if you're looking forward to Chapter 3, but let's just get right into it. So starting with the oldest news, as you guys probably already know, last week the Mob Games developers actually held a live stream where they played Project Playtime with a bunch of viewers on their channel, and while I couldn't participate because I was on vacation and now I'm sick if you couldn't tell, I did catch a ton of new information about the new chapter. In terms of Project Playtime news, there were some minor things, like them saying that there's going to be a couple new maps, which we could expect based on the tons of unreleased maps hidden in the actual game's files. And they also said they're working on things such as new events and game modes, like the special seasonal skins or the tag game mode we saw them working on previously. But they even mentioned that they were prototyping out the character PJ Pugapillar to soon be in Project Playtime as a brand new monster added into the game, which is something that they've actually teased a while back when they held a survey asking people which monsters they would want to come into the game, to which PJ Pugapillar seemed to be the most favorite. And now, at least as it appears, we are finally getting him as a real character. However, in terms of Chapter 3 news, there was also a lot to talk about here. For starters, as we've covered on the channel, the devs said that the third chapter was going to be a lot scarier. However, what's interesting is that the developers went into more depth about how scary the chapter is, even saying they found themselves getting genuinely scared while playtesting it, which has to mean they are doing something right. And plus, by that same token, if they are playtesting the game, while I know like nothing about game development, that has to mean that the full game has to at least be finished in a rough draft state, but I'm not exactly sure. They also told us that in terms of size, that Chapter 3 is going to be a lot larger, which would of course explain the longer work time on this chapter specifically. However, the question I wonder when they say this is, how much longer is the chapter going to be? Because Chapter 2 honestly was already a decent length for a full chapter, taking about an hour and a half to 2 hours in the first playthrough, and the first chapter comes quite short at about 30 minutes. So if this chapter is a lot larger, it could end up being multiple hours on hours long, which would be nice, but it could be a bit weird as a full game to have the first two chapters be so much shorter than the rest, but I digress. In terms of new Chapter 3 gameplay mechanics, the devs actually told us that we are going to be getting multiple new hands in Chapter 3, which is something that they've told us a million times before in the past. However, they told us that it's going to work a lot differently than, say, in Chapter 2, where a hand gets stolen from us and then we find the green one, but rather they said it's going to focus on new mechanics that also supposedly tie into the horror, as they say, which, if I had to blindly guess, could be related to the gas mask, which we've theorized is going to be a new game mechanic we use from the teaser, or perhaps there could be some sort of passive enemy we have to fight away, like what we see in tons of other games like Bendy and the Dark Revival with the Ink Demon. Speaking of horror though, they told us that the VHS tapes in Chapter 3 we see played on the little television screens are going to be a lot scarier this time around. More specifically, one in particular was reported to have a ton of horror elements and to contain big secrets that we will supposedly talk about for chapters to come. Presumably meaning there's going to be a lot of lore twists coming throughout the game that are going to imaginably change the way we view the lore entirely, which in my opinion sounds like a great plan. Plus, they also had told us that Chapter 3's environment was inspired around liminal locations, or places like the backrooms or other areas you've probably seen on TikTok that have a weird creepiness abandoned vibe, almost as if you've seen them in your dreams. And the best comparison I could give to this is probably back in Chapter 1, where everything is seemingly abandoned and motionless, which subtly builds a lot of tension and in my opinion does a better job of really being scary compared to even Chapter 2, where there's so many constant interactions and dialogue that not much tension is really ever built. They also even told us that apparently there were some Chapter 3 secrets hidden inside games like Project Playtime, which we've theorized about previously and we will talk about a lot more later in this video, so stick around. However, the last and probably biggest thing they told us was that when somebody asked about new teasers and even possibly a new ARG coming, the developers simply told us that there were more teasers coming on the way. Or in other words, there's probably going to be more stuff to tease Chapter 3 from teasers and whatnot, which we of course expected. But the next thing I wanted to mention is that if you don't remember, like a year and a half ago now, the developers announced they were collaborating with the Monsters Immortals developers to add Huggy Wuggy and Kissy Missy into their game. And while the collaboration went silent for a while outside of one teaser previously, we recently got another brand new teaser showing the signs saying nobody leaves without a toy, and most importantly, they actually replied to somebody sharing the hype for the DLC, saying that the DLC is estimated to arrive sometime in July, depending of course on approval from the developers. So if you're interested in that DLC, it appears to finally be coming super soon. But moving on from this, the next big thing I wanted to talk about was a few days ago, the developers actually announced a massive surprise that was that Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 was officially getting remastered. And this remaster on the surface contains what you'd expect with very minor graphical and shading updates, the addition of a skybox in the map, which is nice, and the ability to skip the VHS tapes, thank goodness. However, there were also some more unexplainable things that happened in this newest update. For example, some people spotted a lemon sitting at the bottom of the last area of the chapter, and in fact, if you were to interact with this lemon by cheating, it can even make some sound effects, or even funnier, it can actually kill you, which gives you a weird death screen. However, more importantly, people notice things like improved lighting on the game, which allows you to see stuff better, like this prototype painting here that says "Wonderful," which was always in the game, but we could see it now thanks to the better lighting. And perhaps most importantly, a lot of people started pointing out that if you go into the vent area where Huggy chases us, we can actually see what I believe is some new writing on the walls, most of which is just useless random stuff that we saw before, but we can also see a couple pieces of writing that reads "Elliot and leave her to die," which, while we don't know for sure, I theorize that this "her" in the writing is most likely the Poppy Playtime doll, since there is a ton of evidence to suggest that Poppy was originally created to revive his daughter who passed away according to his documentary. Plus, they say to leave her to die, which sounds like the people writing this are telling Elliot to leave Poppy away in the case where we find her originally, which would make sense since we see Poppy years later in the factory despite her most likely being Elliot's daughter. And we also know the factory ended at some point when all of the toys escaped and attacked all of the employees based on the ending chapter 1 VHS tape, so it would make sense that he would leave in a panic. And if this was true, it could even suggest that Elliot is still alive in the factory, but I'm not exactly sure. However, by far the most important thing relating to this chapter 1 remaster is the date that it released, that of which being June 20th of this year, which people were actually quick to point out was a date that is shown up before in the game Project Playtime, where we could see a Daddy Longlegs poster that says RSVP before 620. And while when I initially saw this poster, I assumed it was some sort of random date, clearly it meant something judged by this random drop on this very day. And it wouldn't take long for people to pull out other dates throughout the game. For example, on this exact same poster, we could see the date July 15th. And of course, there's the famous date we see on a post-it note outside of the Project Playtime map on June 27th, which is literally like in 3 days. And so with that being said, people are now theorizing that these two dates are going to be for something very important. More specifically, with these 2 days, people have been theorizing that the June 27th date could be the start of a new ARG, which I've covered in other videos, a new possible teaser perhaps, or maybe even a remaster of Poppy Playtime Chapter 2, but there's been no Steam updates as I've checked, so I doubt it. However, most importantly, this July 15th date coming here in about a month is actually theorized to possibly be for a trailer for Chapter 3, or even better yet, this maybe could be some foreshadowing for when the game will actually end up being officially released. I mean, it might seem like a wild theory for them to put the release date inside of a game this early, but we actually know the developers love to hide secrets for future chapters in the games incredibly early. For example, right after Chapter 1 release, they dropped a teaser that hid the Mommy Longlegs model, or even like we talked about before, Chapter 1's initial release had the prototype model already teased months early. So who knows what kind of mysteries we are missing in the game that are already findable right now and just need to be found by the right person. But as Chapter 3 gets closer, I'll keep my eyes peeled, and if you're hungry for Chapter 3 content, check out this video going over my release date predictions. Subscribe, by the way, and peace.